if you could, just go ahead and share it. So, Jim, how's it going?
Well, doing fine, Steve. It's been a fascinating time if you're a political observer in terms of the craziest presidential election in anybody's memory. Historians tell you go back into the 1800s and you have Andrew Jackson and Thomas Jefferson and all kinds of shenanigans being pulled. But in our lifetimes, we've never witnessed anything like we're seeing right now with the with Trump. You almost wait daily for what outrageous thing he'll say that often makes his poll numbers go up. And you look for the same day for what Hillary Clinton will stumble over. The cool lady who's supposed to have everything in order, and she just makes one basic political mistake after the other. So it's been a really wild and woolly thing. People, and people say, I just want to get this thing over. I'm so sick of it. But the ratings for cable TV have never been greater. The rallies are big. I think people are going to have a withdrawal focus after the campaign. Say, guys, where's all the controversy? There's nothing to talk about. So I'm not sure they're as sick of it as we say. I mean, you and I are. We want to get on to other priorities, but it's been a wild ride. And now, when we thought last Friday, 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the morning, I think you and I were talking then, it looked like the momentum was definitely with Clinton, that although Trump might do a few things to tighten it up, it just wasn't going to be hard to beat Clinton. The odds makers were saying overwhelmingly Clinton. Show you folks at home what the odds were saying. To win $100, you had to bet $475 on Hillary Clinton. If you wanted to win $100 on Trump, you just by putting up your $100, you'd win $275. What that means is that overwhelmingly the odds makers were saying Hillary Clinton was going to win this race, even though it's going to be a little tighter. Well, that all went out the window. In fact, Friday evening, I checked weekend, and I always like to have some fun, play the odds. The bookmakers had taken the bet completely off the board. You could not go to Las Vegas. You could go to Las Vegas and bet on anything, Steve. You could not vote in this race Friday night, Saturday morning. It's gone back up now with Clinton still the favorite, although the race is tightened up, and it's all over this latest involving James Comey, the director, on something that, quite frankly, is unprecedented. If I can just tell you, listeners, this thing, the FBI is the investigator. They're merely an investigative arm. It gathers up all the information, gives it to the Justice Department, a separate entity, for them to decide whether it's worth making a criminal case or not. Well, Comey, the director, went way out on the limb a month ago and said that he found nothing wrong with Hillary Clinton's emails, rather than just shutting his mouth and going ahead and doing his investigation and turning it over to the Justice Department. Well, the Trump people went crazy. They were just blasting Comey, how political he was. What's he getting involved in this for? We waited 3 weeks, Steve, and the pendulum swung completely the other direction with the Clinton people going nuts and saying, why on earth would he say that he's looking at it one more time with a new batch of emails involving this crazy guy Weiner up in New York? We can get into all that if you want to, but basically, he's saying he's reopening the investigation and announcing it to the whole world, something that's never been done before. Over 100 former U.S. attorneys have signed, including Eric Holder, the last Attorney General, signed a petition and signed a letter to Comey saying that what he did was completely out of line, completely improper. And I think the focus is whether you're for Clinton or Trump. They both got stuck with this, not off the record, but this innuendo by the FBI that was completely improper. As a lawyer, I agree with that. They should have just stayed out of it. If you got a criminal investigation to make and you want to pass it on, it's up to the Justice Department to make the referral. He didn't do that. So anyway, it has had a negative effect. I listened in Louisiana to a WWL poll this morning saying that 75% of those polled have concurred that it's certainly very negative towards Clinton and was going to influence their vote. Now, having said that, Clinton's not going to carry Louisiana, and a good number of those people were not for her to begin with.
Sure.
But the fact remains that it's done damage, and in a very close election, what's going to happen now, Steve? It's all going to come down to turnout. This election is pretty even, and the candidate that gets more of their voters to the polls is going to win the election. And we can talk about that a little later on, but that's kind of where the upswing of it is all right now.
Sure. So your feeling is that Comey did the wrong thing?
Well, Comey should have done, it's not a question of wrong thing. There was no choice for him. His sole choice as head of the FBI was to tell his folks, put the case together and send it to the Justice Department. It wasn't a question of whether he should or whether he shouldn't. That was his job. And releasing this information and giving these statements that he made is directly in conflict with the specific guidelines issued by the FBI to every one of their agents, and involving a major race like that, for the simple reason that you don't want the federal government influencing elections. If there's a case to make, you make the case. If there's not, you don't. But that's not his call. The call goes to the Justice Department. And so it's not a question of did he make the wrong call. He wasn't supposed to make any call at all. He was supposed to say, here, Attorney General, you folks look it over and you decide whether we should pursue this from a criminal point of view. And he didn't do that. So he's under a lot of criticism. The Trump people now saying, oh, he's got courage, where a month ago he was a lowlife. And so a lot of politics involved. And the big issue for us and for your listeners, I want to know, what effect is this going to have on the election? And I've got some thoughts on that, but I'll throw it back to you. But I think we can kind of analyze that too.
Okay. Well, let me just throw something out to you. And I'm going to play devil's advocate. Normally, I played on the pro or anti-Trump side. This time, I'm going to take his side, and that is, and I do believe, I'm not just playing devil's advocate. This is how I do believe. I do believe that the real problem is that it's Clinton's fault. No question. I mean, the whole email thing, her fault. And then, of course, it was complicated with Bill Clinton in terms of his meeting with the Attorney General on the airplane at Tarmac. And so that changed everything. And that put the Attorney General in jeopardy and neutralized her altogether. Especially, she goes and she says, well, I'm going to leave it up to the FBI director. I'm going to accept his recommendation. Now, having said that, I think that what happened was, and I had mixed feelings about this, but said recommendation. But he went on, instead of giving a recommendation, he went on and gave his opinion more so than recommendation. And then he was called in front of Congress and he gave more information. I personally have always accepted what Comey has done as being the right thing. In terms of, on something of this nature, being as controversial as it is, being as public as it is, to give the information, the rationale, the reason why, and so on. And so I've never, even when everybody was calling him a traitor and denouncing the FBI and saying things, calling them a traitor and denouncing them, these people put their lives up, in jeopardy, and yet the pro-Trump people in particular were so offensive to make those kind of announcements. So jump forward, and so now you have a situation where you have the FBI investigating, of course, Clinton's associate, and of course Anthony Weiner. And what happens? They come across information that becomes more than curious. Now that's at this point in time where I have really uncertainty. I'm not sure what happened after that. I'm not sure whether or not if he should have gone and written a letter to Congress. I know that during the testimony he said that he would update. I know that. I know that he was pressured by the Republicans and by the Democrats to start investigating. Investigate for the Republicans, Hillary, for the Democrats, the Russians, in terms of Trump and the computers. So, at this point in time, I think you have to look at, well, did he do the right thing in terms of providing information to the public at this late date. I'm sure the Trump people would be going crazy if he did something on the Russians at this point. And I'm sure that the Clinton people are going crazy, which, I can understand that, by saying something as vague as he did, without saying, hey, look, we've come across something. It doesn't look like it implicates anybody from first blush. We really don't know. We don't want to assume anything. I think that would have been a lot better. But the way he did it, that is, I think, the reason why it opened up the door. Anyway, that's my side so far. Go ahead.
Like I say, Steve, I just hate to think that every time there's some rumor or innuendo or maybe some new information that they all want to look at, that there's a public pronouncement from any U.S. attorney or from the Attorney General or from the FBI.
Right.
Go ahead and make your investigation. Why should you smear people? Let's assume that Steve Savladovsky is right on the verge of signing a big contract with NBC to take Bayou Buzz all over the nation. And it's the biggest thing that's happened in your life. And somebody in your office makes some rumor statement about some emails or something like that, and a statement's made by the prosecutors. Well, we got some information about this guy Savladovsky, so we're going to investigate. Keep your damn mouth shut. If you've got a charge to bring the charge. Don't hold back on the charge. But don't do it to spread innuendo, but coulda, woulda, shoulda, when your guidelines that have been approved by Congress that are in the book says you don't make public statements. You go ahead and bring in indictments. And look, you listeners down in New Orleans know better than we saw in this terrible scandal with the U.S. attorney when Jim Linton had to resign, when this guy Sal Pericone is trying to leak things from the grand jury. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So that's not the way I want to live in America. I want those folks to do their job. If someone's crossed the line, bring charges.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to interrupt you and tell you I saw this as I was setting this up, and I didn't read the story. Okay, so those people watching, okay, this is breaking news, and Jim, I put it on Facebook, so you may want to share it now from your Facebook to your friends. But here, I'm going to read this to you. It says the FBI Director, James Comey, argued privately that it was too close to Election Day for the United States government to name Russia as meddling in the United States election, and ultimately ensured that the FBI's name was not on the document that the U.S. government put out, a former Bureau official tells CNBC. The official said some government insiders are perplexed as to why Comey would have election timing concerns with the Russian disclosure, but not with Huma Abedin email discovery disclosure he made Friday. In the end, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office Director of National Intelligence issued the statement on October 7, which I put up on Bayou Buzz, that said the U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from the U.S. and institutions, including from the U.S. political organizations. These thefts and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process. We got a problem. If that is true, we have a real problem. If this is true, in my opinion, I try not to be, jumping the gun when I see something on media. But if this is true, James Comey has something explaining to do. Because, we're not just dealing, of course, with Homeland Security. If it's true, we're dealing with the Russians. And it's bad enough, and I've articulated so many times already in the past, that in my opinion, Donald Trump is lying. He's not telling the truth about the Russians. He's not telling them the truth about his connections to the Russians, his business deals with the Russians, the money that he has allegedly, and everything I've read, has borrowed from, Russian interests. Instead, he said that he sold a condo to a Russian. You remember that.
Right.
Okay? But, there's been the Washington Post and I think the Wall Street Journal have reported in the past about his interests, business interests. And the Democrats went forward with a request to the FBI, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, how they both were trying to play politics and pressure. And he decides on one hand to send an email, a letter to the Congress that he knew was going to be made public. And he privately says, no, it's too close to the elections. Something smells here. Really, something is wrong. And I've defended FBI Director Comey, and those people watching, please, I'd like to hear from you. If you're watching the FBI, this on our FBI discussion here. So Jim, you might come across something. Anyway, your thoughts.
Well, I go back to what I said originally. It's not his job to make these pronouncements. Just tell your people. And, there's good investigators in the FBI that go out and put their cases together, and they give it as a package to the Attorney General, and the case is made. It's just not their job to make public pronouncements about what it could have, should have, we're looking at this, maybe about this. And so you're right. You're talking about inconsistent choices, but he shouldn't have been inconsistent at all. He never should have even made a choice, is my point. And that's the troubling thing, that if the FBI wants to get into something like this, are they going to get into every other little situation in Louisiana, in Texas, all over the country? And there ought to be some consistency in law enforcement in this country. And unfortunately, we've seen in many, many cases there is no consistency. So I think you made an excellent point, Steve. And the question that, he kind of picked and chose what he would do and what he would say. And it's not his job to say anything. And by doing what he's done, he's turned up a heck of a hornet's nest. I saw that the minority leader in the Senate said he violated federal law. And I'll tell you, if the Senate goes to the Democrats, there's going to be major investigations of this guy, and he's going to have his work cut out for him. Well, that's just unfortunate. Like you say, from what I gather in the past, I don't know anything about the guy. He seemed like to be a pretty fair guy, but he just as Hillary Clinton has created her big mess, James Comey has created his big mess by making statements that never should have been made. Just do your job. Have your people put the stuff together and give it to the Attorney General. And by the way, in all the reports in the New York Times today, I've got it right here, the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, and the Office of the U.S. Justice Department told Comey he shouldn't be doing this. He should. And they cited the guidelines of the FBI. He felt like whatever his reasons, whether he need to clarify whatever. I think the lesson learned here is do your job, don't make statements, and let it go from there.
If anybody has,
Fact remains, Steve, it is a problem, and so it's a question of how big a problem is it to the Clinton campaign. Trump is doing what any candidate would do. He's coming down very hard on it, demanding investigations, saying there's corruption. And that would be the same line taken by Mitt Romney 4 years ago in the same scenario. John McCain, I don't care who the candidate was. So the question is now, how much damage was done to the Clinton campaign? And with 8 days to go, can she survive in the next 8 days?
Well, I tell you what, if this story, CNBC, it's not Breitbart, it's not. I certainly trust CNBC. It's not a liberal publication, and so I think this is big news. I really think this is big news. I don't get it. The only distinction would be that he made a commitment. He made a commitment to Congress that he would update. Well, he didn't say when he would update. And again, a few minutes ago, I said I have no problems with that. I think what he did was the right thing. But as I'm looking at this, think about this. Assuming the truth of this, assuming the truth, we're talking about Russians who have been our enemies, who invaded Ukraine, our allies, who Donald Trump has been supporting all this time. And the FBI director says it's too late to investigate, yet he announces this. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, like I agree that it seemed way out of line, and the whole Russian idea, there's a Louisiana connection for all of our viewers who are watching if they haven't seen that or not. The Russians have been in contact with the Louisiana Secretary of State, and I'm aware of all this. I used to be the Secretary of State of Louisiana, and they wanted to send observers in for our election process. They picked 3 states, Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana, all states that have talked about secession at some point in the past, and the Russians are in here wanting to observe our elections. So it gets a stranger as each twist of this whole case comes about. But I think you're right on with the Russians saying what they're saying, and we've seen the results, and our government says they tried to infiltrate a variety of systems, possibly influence our election. It's something that Comey ought to be heavily investigating, but picking and chewing when he's doing it. What you also said, Steve, he said he would update Congress. Well, you do it right before the election, and I don't know the specifics, but everything I've seen was they saw a lot of emails involving the federal government on this fella Anthony Weiner's computer that his wife, Huma Weiner, or Aberdeen, I think is her maiden name, close confidant of Hillary Clinton. They had emails there. Now, I think they said, look, we don't know what's in these emails, but we found all these emails. Well, then why are you saying anything? Go ahead and take your forensic people and look at the emails and see if there's anything there. And if it leads to a crime, then take whatever action you want. But to do so right in the format of a very close election, to me, is just completely improper.
Yeah, and I have to agree. I see that the article is also being apparently there's a second source to the story. So look, this is going to. I mean, I got to tell you, this is a nightmare for America. I mean, a real nightmare. Number one, we have 2 candidates who are not trustworthy at all. They certainly are not George Washington or Abe Lincoln. They're not the mother or father of our country in any respect. In fact, if I had a father like Donald Trump or a mother like Hillary Clinton, I think I'd want to become an orphan. I mean, seriously, and that's a real shame, because we've got to tell our kids to respect not just our adults, but the people in our government, the people who are going to send us to war, the people who are going to be making our laws, who are going to be putting us in jail, and so on. I just had a discussion on Facebook, a pretty heated discussion, I must tell you. And by the way, if anybody, let me say that if anybody on Facebook where we're posted is if they want to make a comment, please go ahead and jump in, because we're going to cut it short. We're going to, we've got this breaking news, and we're going to cut it short, maybe jump back on later on, Jim, if you don't mind, as we get more information maybe this evening. But I will tell you that I posted something just about an hour or 2 ago, and it was a story that I saw. And the story said that Donald Trump has, and his attorneys, have destroyed over the years documents and emails and just and listed all the times that they were destroyed, and a court judge's statement about it. And I got to tell you, I mean, I made, and a liberal friend of mine said, how dare you, I mean, in so many words, how dare you try to, say that these situations are similar. I'm not. I'm not saying that destroying documents in a legal business contract or business lawsuit is equal to doing something, destroying records that are being subpoenaed by the FBI or Congress, anything of that nature. What I am saying, though, is that this is something that should be discussed. This is something that, that if we're talking about somebody who's going to be president of the United States, we have a right to know if he's destroying documents. We have a right to know if she's destroying documents. We have a right to ask them and, ask their transparency. And to say, oh, no, you can't talk about this, but you can talk about that. I think we should talk about both of them and talk about what they did, whether it's an illegal contract or lawsuit environment or in a national security environment. They're both wrong because we have respect. We have to have respect for our court systems. And when we can just go and make legal pleadings and say whatever we want, and we can go ahead and destroy documents, whether it's national security or anything in the public interest as the court is, that's wrong. Go ahead.
Well, no, I think you're right on the money, and you're supposed to have three branches of government and a check and balance, and we want fair results, but you can demean the character and destroy an individual by innuendo is what you can do, and that's where government has all this power, and that's not been discussed that much in the campaign, Steve, but in terms of the regulatory function where regulators can make rules that can and investigate and fine people and bring them to their knees and really bankrupt them without due process. So due process is extremely important. It's something you've spoken up for. You're an attorney. I'm an attorney. And I would say that in most of the instances, we do get due process. The system, it doesn't work that great, but it certainly works better than anything else anybody's come up with. And so, but there are breaks in the system to where due process goes out the window and character assassination comes in and things that are said that have no business being said. And that you can't do much under the libel laws when it's an individual, but when it's a government entity that we've entrusted fairness to and trust the justice system to, when they start the innuendo, then that's where I think you got to draw the line. So I hope there is a reasonable response from Congress to try to clean up and make it clear that, look, we've got a certain set of rules to play by those rules, and I hope that happens after the election, whoever is elected here next Tuesday.
Okay. By the way, would you be able to join us in a couple of hours?
Sure, glad to.
You get an update?
And why it's important to take a break if you listeners are listening live is that I'm already looking out the window and seeing the trick-or-treaters out. So I've got a big neighborhood where I've got candy galore and Halloween focus galore. And so I want to shy away for a little break from the trick-or-treaters, the Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton trick-or-treaters. And go to the young folks and help them out, and we'll come back and talk some more. I'd like to do so, Steve.
Okay, thanks a lot. Listen, I hope we'll know more about this story. Apparently, I'm just looking, Loretta Lynch issued a dire warning to James Comey before he relaunched Clinton email investigation. This thing is not going to end. Maybe you ought to postpone the election.
To let us keep talking about it for a while. But you're right. Whatever happens, Congress is going to continue. The obstructions are going to be there, and so this isn't going to slow down. This isn't going to slow down.
Okay. Well, we're going to slow down this particular discussion. And thank you, Jim. I really appreciate your taking time. I'll get back with you about what time we can get together again, okay?
I look forward to talking to you. They go to my website at JimBrownUSA.com to read all my columns and find out more of the outrageous things that you and I say, Steve.
By the way, I posted your article, your column. It's on Bayou Buzz right now, and it's a really good one. I have a very interesting picture up there associated with your column. You need to take a look at it.
The trials and tribulations of me trying to vote. So
yeah,
it sure has changed in 30, 40 years. But
absolutely. Take a look at the column, and readers go to BayouBuzz.com and read his column when he was Secretary of State, and talked about that and talked about his like I said, trials and tribulations in his voting just the other day. So thanks a lot, Jim. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.